Hello and welcome to the Durham Talents Channel. My name is Jesse Durham. I teach people how to live and leave a lasting legacy with infinite banking. I was recently on the Money Advantage podcast again with Bruce Wehner and my friend Rob Brayton, and we were discussing what to look for in an agent, in an advisor, when you're looking to implement infinite banking. Here's that conversation, and I hope that you enjoy.
Good morning and welcome back to the Money Advantage podcast. We are going to have an interesting topic today in how to find the right person for you to talk to about insurance. So really the topic is how to find the right insurance agent for you. And that could mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So what I decided to do was Rachel's out on assignment. I always wanted to say that Rachel's out on assignment. Um, and so what I thought I'd do today is bring in some other people that we have a really good working relationship with today, Rob Brayton and Jesse Durham. And they will give perspective from their different levels of experience. Me being the most experienced, Rob being the next, and then Jesse, although he has a nice amount of experience, being the one that has the least amount of experience of us three. And we'll talk about the different things that we've seen. Mine goes all the way back to the 80s. Rob will bring it back a decade or so, right, Rob? Or how long has it been now that you've been in the industry?
It depends. Depends on the
But yeah,
first time I was licensed versus now.
right.
So
Right. That's exactly what the way mine is too. I had a little hiatus in there too. And then Jesse, how long has it been for you?
And it's 2019.
2019. Oh, right before COVID. We often say BC as religious people, and I also use BC now to mean before COVID. So it's a very interesting marker in everybody's life nowadays. We can get off on historical perspectives here if I'm not careful on how this goes. So most people, guys, don't realize how much an insurance agent can impact their financial future. You and I, all three of us actually participated in a mastermind on Tuesdays, and David Hammer was talking about, that when he was on Wall Street, that insurance was just somebody else that should do it because it's not that important. And what's interesting, I have another colleague of mine that just gets incensed every time somebody dies prematurely, and yet they don't have any insurance, and their family has to turn to GoFundMe to actually do this, and to help their family. And what's interesting is the Wall Street people, um, they don't think about those kind of things like the risk protection getting towards that goal line. And I forgot the guy's name. We had him on the podcast. He wrote a book that said investments don't hug. And that's what life insurance does for you, is actually in time of need, it actually puts arms around you, a financial arms around you to hug you and say everything's going to be okay. And so finding that right person will mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So to me, it has to be a person that is in touch with you emotionally, and that person can connect with you and your family from an emotional level to actually bring insurance from what I grew up with. I don't know about you guys, but I grew up in needs analysis life insurance. What do you need? And I changed my thinking over the years to, it shouldn't be what you need, it should be what do you want. So that's one of the first things that I look at when somebody starts talking about whether we're trying to identify somebody that is more of a modern approach to this. Is do they ask me questions about what I want, not all of a sudden just sit down with a piece of paper or some calculator and try to figure out what you need. So those are my initial thoughts. So Rob, why don't we go to you? What are some of your initial thoughts about, is this the right insurance agent for you?
Yeah, there's a lot of different things, a lot of different avenues that I think a person can go down. And I think you did a good job kind of highlighting some of those initial thoughts. Um, I I think one of the things that really stands out to me is especially when we're talking, in this space, we're talking about life insurance. It's, is that person going to be there if I need them? So often, and I know when Jesse and I have talked before, this is a big point that I made at that time, but I want someone to be there. And, I'm going to speak for myself personally because I think that's where most consumers, most, people watching this are going to be coming from is the person going to be there when I need them the most? And that's something that I think all of us really take to heart in that our goal has been to be there for clients. And obviously this isn't about selling or who, come talk to any one of us, certainly look us up and validate all that sort of thing for yourself. But it's more so, do we, are we taking the right steps to say, is this person in this for the long haul? Do they want to be there to serve my family? And does that come across in a genuine fashion? Those are things that we have to really consider, at least within this space. And then on top of that, it's also okay, they do the insurance part, but is there other value they could provide as well? Maybe somebody has, like myself, I have business background, so I can actually help people, if they want to bounce ideas off from a consulting standpoint, whatever it might be, I can do that for my customers. You know, Jesse has different experience there too, where he can do those things. Um, I know a big part of like what, the Money Advantage, it's all about legacy. And there's great experience that is present for those working in that capacity. I wrote a book as well. And I mean, I focus a lot on that sort of stuff with my clients also, that legacy building aspect. So there's so many different things that can kind of tie into an agent. And it's more than just, oh, I need $500,000 in coverage in case I pass away to cover my mortgage. Well, that question of what you need versus what you want, Bruce, that you mentioned earlier, those are two very different things. And, are people considering, well, what I want to make sure that my spouse doesn't have to work for, 10 years, 12 years, whatever it is, if I were to pass away, or maybe you're the primary breadwinner and your spouse passes away. Do you want who's going to take care of the kids? Those are all different questions that can be asked that I think don't get thought about. It's, well, I have this number in my head, that's what I want, and then it becomes very transactional for a lot of people, and that's not really what it should be. It should be more of we should think about it a little differently. And prior to getting into this space, I'll be the first one to admit I thought that way. Coming from traditional or conventional financial thought and wisdom. That's sort of how you kind of think of things at times. So, Jesse, I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on that too, because I'm sure you have a different perspective as well.
Well, ask me any specific questions that y'all want, of course. I'm looking forward to going back and forth as well. Because my start in getting licensed was for the exact and individual purpose of working with clients who wanted to implement infinite banking. That's a very different trajectory maybe than a lot of folks, but that's my come from. So when I think of insurance at a very high level, I think that from the consumer's perspective, from the client's perspective, I would say that most people don't have the insurance that they should. I think they fit into one of three categories. And then if they do have something, they probably have something that they don't understand or something that's actually different than they think that it is. And then maybe the third category is they just don't have enough. So I think the consumer fits into that category just insurance wise at a very high level. But then, of course, I have that background where I had my box store agent that worked out of the insurance box store in my little town, right, where I went and bought life insurance because that was the prudent financial thing to do as a young husband and father. Got a policy on me, policy on my wife, policy on my child. But then when I became the professional after implementing the infinite banking concept for a few years. I did it for the sole purpose of working with folks that wanted to implement, this concept of becoming your own banker. So that's my high level thinking where we're at right now.
I appreciate that, Jesse, and I'm glad you brought that into because what we're trying to focus on in this episode is people that are going to find this episode are actually probably looking for insurance because they've been exposed to the infinite banking concept. And so what they're coming into now is we're going to be saying is that what are you looking for the right insurance agent? And the first thing you should be looking for, in my opinion, is the person actually telling people he or she is an insurance agent? Because there are a lot of people out on social media that are trying to implement the infinite banking concept, but they're telling people, well, yeah, this is a banking thing, and it isn't until the last possible second that they even bring it up that it's actually insurance. And then some of people actually almost sell it like it's an application to a bank loan. They don't even really bring up the insurance part. So the first part is that if that person isn't confident enough in the wares of the insurance industry itself, and they're only looking at it from the infinite banking concept, that should be a red flag. And what happens in this thing, guys, that I've noticed over my years since I knew Nelson and met Nelson in 2009, and then he became a mentor of mine, is that people really discount the death benefit. And they often point even to Nelson and say, Nelson actually said that the death benefit is not important because he said to pull it down. Well, that's not exactly what Nelson said. Nelson really was saying that the design of the policy, you want to pull the death benefit down, but he really did believe in having your human life value of death benefit. Just that you might have to have multiple policies. You might have to have a standalone term rider off to the side. So if a person isn't actually showing you how much you could get instead of how least you could get on your budget, then they're probably not looking out for your best interest. Now, guys, I want to tell you, and I think you would probably agree with this, is that there are a lot of people out there that it's not lack of character, it's lack of competence. And so what I'm about to say in this podcast is I'm not putting these people down because I think they have lack of character. I think the industry has done a poor job of explaining what you really should be looking for as far as insurance, because everybody thought it was a necessary evil. But the great thing about it is that Nelson brought this, what we thought was a necessary evil, to the forefront and said, hey, we can use this as one of our financial tools to take the banking process into our lives. And we can also have a death benefit with this that can protect our family. So I hope people are really looking at an agent that is looking at things from a variety of perspectives. And that's going to be the thing that I wrote down today is what should consumers expect from a great agent besides selling policies? The first thing, they should be asking a bunch of questions. They should be saying, what are you really trying to accomplish? And why did you actually reach out to me today? And try to stay quiet and let them talk, because there's a lot of agents, including myself. I had to learn this, is I have to just be quiet and let them talk, because they will actually help you figure out what's best for them. If they are not taking a full financial picture as far as where your assets are laying, how many assets you have, what your cash flow is coming in, what your cash flow is coming out, all of these things are dependent upon a good strategy. Whether it's the infinite banking concept, utilizing specially designed whole life insurance products, or whether you're looking for protection first and then the concept later. And that is the number one thing. Let me just, before I throw it off to you guys, one of the things people think that they really do believe they are insurance poor because we have done such a poor job in society. I'm not even going to talk about education, our education system, because this should be in a public education system, because the education system doesn't even know how money works, or we wouldn't be $37 trillion in debt. So I'm going to say, as society, these just say it's my experience that people think that is tremendous amount of dollars. I'm like, okay, how much are we protecting? How much do you make a year? And if a person says, "Oh, I make $100,000 a year, so $1 million should be fine," I'm like, "Oh, really? So out of your 100,000, what's your home? Let's just say it's 85,000, and it's going to be a lot, frankly. It's probably more like 80. So, in order to produce $80,000 a year safely from $1 million, you would have to get 8% uninterrupted compounding growth from $1 million. And that you cannot do safely. So, if an insurance product is a safe product, $1 million is not going to produce safely $80,000. Safely, it's going to produce somewhere in the neighborhood of $40,000 to $50,000. So when you start bringing those things as financial concepts into perspective to people, they start to learn, and they can then uh, come to the conclusion that best suits themselves. So, what are the characteristics, Rob, do you think consumers should expect from a great agent beyond just selling them a policy?
Yeah, there's lots of ways I think we could take that, but I would say, integrity is certainly one of those, right? When we break it down into some of these uh, key attributes. So if you're going to we're going to take integrity as one of those options. Well, what have you found? Do you actually, are we researching the people, so to speak, or are we just saying, this guy works, lives down the street from me, and that's the person I'm going to use? Well, that's fine, but do they really know the product? Have they been committed to, you know, exercising in that industry for some amount of time? I think that's a big part of it. And is it simply that wherever they go, they're always trying to hand out a card and get business, or is it they actually want to get to know you and understand you, much like what you were talking about, Bruce, where, really taking the time to understand somebody's situation. I think that's really critical when we're talking about insurance. And if we aren't willing to take the time, so I think that besides the integrity, it's the person willing to get to know you just as much as you want to get to know them, and where they're taking that time in their process, and it's not sales focused. It really does tie back to what you were talking about, where if I am trying to do what's in the best interest of somebody, I need to know as much as I possibly can about them. Um, you know, a a good I have two brothers that work in the construction field. They don't just show up at a job site and say, well, we're going to throw up this building. They need to understand what is this client planning to use this building for? How is it intended to be used? What what sort of weight are we talking about so we know what the right type of foundation to put in? All these different things come into play when you're doing a lot of different aspects of career. So whether that's construction, whether it's uh, consulting, whatever, you have to understand who you're working with. So that person, I think a couple of core areas just to recap, and then I can pass it to Jesse or back to you. But thinking of integrity, and then that like genuine curiosity to understand who you are and what you're looking for, and what those goals are.
Yeah, thank you. Just so build upon that if you can.
Yeah, I can. When we're both on this page, the client is looking to implement infinite banking. I think that we as agents and advisors will make sure that we're helping that client develop their understanding of the concept. We know how to help them implement it. We know how to construct policy, and they need to know that, of course. We need to be becoming very familiar with their, what I call their financial footprint. You look at it like a topographical map. You need to know where they've built up certain things. You need to know where they have low points. You need to know, I mean, you were describing earlier, Bruce, somebody that sounded like a conversation I had yesterday. Single mom, 3 children, has some current insurance, but I put a metric to it. I said, well, what you currently have, you got a great income, but what you currently have in force today only represents a, you know, this availability, what's available to you at your age, your income, like 16%. That's where you're at right now. Would you like to improve upon that? So just asking, questions, Rob, getting a feel for where they're at, getting a sense of what their financial footprint looks like. So, I think we need to be cultivating ongoing understanding of infinite banking while we're gathering information. Their discovery type questions are what they're called. And at the high level, the thing that's sticking out to me the most is process. I would suggest that folks that are looking to work with an agent work with somebody who has an obvious process. It should be organic. It should be two-sided, right? We're both coming in on this two-sidedly, but there should be a method to it.
Very good. I think one of the things I want to shift now to is this idea that it used to be everybody would just look into yellow pages. A lot of our listeners may not even know what a yellow pages are. And then it went to Google. You would just hit Google, and Google had location services, and so they would show you the top people that were in your area, and then you would pick that person, and then you'd go to them. And now it's completely changed. It's instead of Googling which insurance agent you're going to actually talk to, you're actually Googling what is the lowest price I can get on insurance, or where's the lowest price I can get on insurance. And I tell people that's not the right question to ask. That would be like saying you have cancer and you say, what's the lowest price I can get this cancer out of my body? And you would never do that. You would never do that. And yet, when you say, "Oh, what's the lowest price I can get covered for $1 million of coverage?" You're not asking about duration. You're not asking about the characteristics of the person. Are they going to be there for you? Are they going to do annual reviews? Are they going to put a company in front of you that actually has good customer service? This is one of the big ones for somebody that's been in the industry for 40 plus years. Is I've seen not only not I'm not saying these companies are going to go out of business, but the services that they have, when you need something like, um, I want to do a policy loan, or I my bank draft got messed up. Can I talk to somebody and easily get that fixed? Your insurance agent should help you with that. But even the insurance agent, from my point of view, is when I call that company and I can't even get a competent person on the line, that is very frustrating. And thus I can't help you if that person can't even help an insurance agent. So I would say there's nothing wrong with captive insurance companies. Many of the companies that we use right now in this infinite banking concept space are not captive companies. They're broker companies, so you can have different licenses with them. And I actually think that helps keep those particular companies trying to get better, because they're competing for your business. And if they're competing for your business, yeah, guys, we all know we have difficulty with these different companies that we work with, but at least they're trying to get better. When you're with a captive company, a lot of times I think they take the agent and the client for granted a little bit. So if we're looking for things out there on the internet, you should actually be asking the question is how much has that person actually worked with these companies and why do they work with these companies? I don't think clients ask that question enough. Why are you working with that company? I actually bring it up and I say, well, I'm working with company X, Y, and Z because this company does this really well. This company does this really well. And this company with this, and you want to work with that company? I'm sorry. I can't go in that direction because I've had this experience with that company. And matter of fact, I just had an email before this with one of the companies that I do not like to do business with, but I took over as agent of record. I didn't sell the policy, but a client now had an old policy. I took over, and I'm just cringing that I have to actually call this company. It's just going to drive me crazy. It's going to be wasting my time. So as we're looking out on the internet now, you should be looking for people that are actually talking about these different things instead of just saying, hey, call me. I'll compare your policy to what I have, and we will get you a better policy. That is to me, that is the number one red flag in our industry right now. Because what that person is doing is they're not looking at you from your best for your best interest. They're looking at it from their best interest, but they're trying to manipulate you and make it seem like it's for your best interest. But I'm going to tell you, I've been doing this whole life insurance since the 80s. There's very, very few times. And when I say very few times, I'm talking about less than 1% of the time anybody should ever replace a whole life insurance contract. You might modify it, but you should not replace it for a variety of reasons. And that's not part of this podcast, but that is a huge red flag that's going out over the social media and the internet right now. Bring me your policy, which they call it a policy. They say it all the time. Bring me your policy, and I will show you how our situation is better because that company's bad. That person didn't set it up right. But what they're actually doing is asking you to bring your illustration, which is not the contract, and they're going to compare illustrations. Well, I used to be an old football coach, and basketball coach. I used to say the person with the pencil last is going to win the game. So all you're doing is showing the bad parts about that in your perception compared to something else. So if people are comparing illustrations, that should be a huge red flag. If they're trying to get you out of one contract just so they can get you in another contract, that should be a huge red flag. So that is my number one thing as far as when people are trying to find a good agent out on the internet and social media is if they are telling you, bring your stuff to me, I'll do a free complimentary comparison. What they're really trying to do is replace that policy, and that is not in your best interest. So I'm going to throw it to you, Rob. Tell me now kind of your number. Oh, yeah, Joe, go ahead, Jesse. Go ahead.
Let me jump in on that just because I am the guy who introduced first, I think, into the conversation that, people might not have insurance, people might have not enough insurance. And then I said, people might have some kind of insurance and they think it's one thing, but it's another. So I would candidly say that as part of looking at someone's financial footprint, if they have in-force insurance, I'm going to look at that. I'm going to ask for that. And I need to for a couple of reasons, not just to have an accurate picture of their financial footprint at large, but if we're going to be building new policies and they have something that can be used already for infinite banking because it was whole life, great. That's good information to know. But I understand what you're exactly saying, of course, as perhaps a business tactic of trying to intentionally replace what could be great policies, great assets that people already own. But I also want to say, the other side of the coin looks like this. If you're looking for an agent who's going to help you implement infinite banking, they're going to ask you about enforce policies that you already have. And that's going to be relevant to how a policy would be structured for you moving forward, or modifications, like you said. After implementing infinite banking for some years, I learned more about insurance along the way, of course, even as a consumer myself, someone who buys whole life insurance. And I've made modifications to older policies that I started out with when I started my journey. So I just wanted to throw that in there since I'd already put myself out there. What
No,
would you
absolutely.
have?
Well, let me clarify that. So I'm not saying that you don't make modifications. As a matter of fact, I thought I actually said modifications.
You
So you
did.
can actually, maybe you even don't pay as much to that policy. Maybe you even RPU that policy. Maybe you don't do anything. You just continue what you were doing in that policy and you start something else. But to actually just replace it, or what we call in our industry a 1035 replacement, where you take the cash value from that policy and put it into another policy, there are so many things that uh, not only financially don't make any sense, but mathematically they don't make any sense, except the fact that the person that does it gets paid again for that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think, as you said, Jesse, as a business tactic, that's the number one thing that I would be questioning when a person sees it on social media, when they say that. Now, if they say, I want to review your financial situation, but when they start saying, I want to look at your contracts because we can get you in a better situation,
Different
or, or
story.
or a better company. We can get you with a better company. There's even the companies that I don't particularly care. I think you just heard me say this. I became the agent of record of the company that I did not like. Okay. I didn't replace that. I became the agent of record because I wasn't going to 1035 that cash value into a company that I like. So I get paid. And once again, this isn't Bruce being St. Bruce here. I'm just saying that this is what's best for the client. And when you do what's best for the client, then they're going to then work with you down the road, and it's going to be what's best for you. We all are looking out for what's best for us, but as a society, if we do what's best for others, then it comes around and it's what's best for us. Okay, Rob, why don't you
Yeah.
put a bow on this thing?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you guys said a lot of awesome stuff there that I fully agree with. And when I think about this situation of, reviews and so on, reviewing, just like what you said, is totally okay if it's part of the process. It's part of understanding that person's scenario, their current asset picture, et cetera. However, one of the things that I like to really stress as part of my process is education. I want to make sure my client is educated about the insurance process. And again, that's within reason. I'm not going to sit there and make them sit through a 3 hour long, situation of understanding insurance, but they should understand the basics, right? They should understand what is happening within a whole life contract. If they have something that's existing and it's hitting that point where it's really starting to churn from an efficiency standpoint, we don't want to touch that. That's in its becoming in its prime state where it's actually going to provide the most benefit for them. So I really look at it as education. And if someone's not willing to educate or learn about the process, which I think really ties into, Nelson, right? Whether or not somebody has the arrival syndrome, if somebody's not willing to learn about the process, I mean, I'll be honest, as an agent, like I select just as much as somebody's vetting me. I think a good agent's also vetting their clients, because if they're in a situation where they're simply looking for the least expensive thing, well, I mean, they don't really care about the rest of it. And that isn't worth the time to invest and really help bring somebody up to that next level, where they are not only a more informed customer or client, but they are also now more informed about the banking system, about the banking process, how that ties in with their policies that they have. So that educational aspect for me is a really big component of this whole scope of talking about what exists within the space. And, we as agents, I think that's a critical component of our process, or should be a critical component of our process, to help them understand what it is they're taking possession of and why this asset is beneficial for their situation.
Very good. Nelson said, if you give a tool to a person that doesn't know how to use it, what they end up doing is breaking the tool.
Mhm.
And that's what happens when you just give something to somebody. What I found that because I worked with a lot of families over my career, is most of the time, now this isn't a blanket statement, but most of the time, the man actually, because of our egos, we think we know what's going on, and the female, because of their humility, says, I don't know anything, just tell me what to do. And both of those are dangerous situations. And so I try to sell them, no, you're going to learn this before we move forward, because um, you have to become your own banker. It it says it right in the title, becoming your own banker. Because if you don't know what you're doing, all you're doing is buying a whole life insurance policy, which it does have some great merits, but that's not why you're doing it. So as we wrap this up, um, I tell people, if they've gotten to the end of this podcast, which thank you for listening, um, you should be questioning everything you hear, because you just might believe the people you're listening to. And if you don't have enough of different perspectives and you just focus on one person, you're going to believe because they're on a podcast that they have credibility, or if they wrote a book, they have credibility, or if they were on a stage, they have credibility. And there's a lot of ways to do a podcast or write a book and get on a stage. And so that doesn't just bring credibility. So you should be questioning everybody you listen to. What is their motives? What are their credentials? What is their experience? Do they have other contingency networking plans? One of the things I love about you two guys is you were rugged individualists. You had your own, but you said that's not good for my clients. I'm going to go out and get a network of other people that can help in this situation. And that's a great thing that social media has done now, because when I came up in the business, everybody was just a rugged individualist. And so if that person that sold you the policy died, became disabled, or got out of the business, guess what they call that person that has those policies? They call them orphans. Orphans are not good. So if you have a network of people that can take over those situations, which I applaud you guys for building a network, then that's another characteristic people should be looking for, is, do these people have a network of competent individuals? So we have about just a couple of minutes. I'm gonna give you 30 seconds to just get your last, little thought process going, and then I know it'll go about 45 or a minute. But Jesse, let's go with you first. Just kind of tie this whole episode, why you wanted to do it, and what people should be looking for.
Sure. The biggest assumption I've made so far is that the client would know that the agent that they are vetting or working with actually has implemented infinite banking in their own personal lives. So I'm going to say the obvious. Can that agent show you that they've paid significant premiums for them into policies that they privately own, that they're privately, personally using for implementing the concept in their lives? Do they have an established process of helping you through that education, like Rob was talking about, looking at your financial footprint? What is their view and philosophy? I tell clients, listen, because I'm vetting you, like Rob said also, I'm vetting you while you're vetting me. If I decide to take you on as a client, it's because I anticipate working with your grandchildren and helping them grow and scale what it is that you have started. So I'm looking for process. I'm looking that agent has personally implemented the concept in their life, building a system of policies, putting the concept into work. And folks like Rob, and Bruce at the Money Advantage, myself as well, we have put ourselves out there on our YouTube channels and podcasts. We are open books. We are putting out information and best practices so that you could see that from us. But then you can have that, of course, one-on-one relationship as well.
Yeah, good points there, Jesse. And I mean, to kind of tap off of that, I think one of the biggest reasons why I got into this space is because I saw what infinite banking did for me and our family, and just the tremendous impact that it had and is having, not only on our long-term legacy, but also on our day-to-day financial picture. And I wanted to be able to do that for other people. I wanted others to see how valuable that is. That level of freedom that comes from implementing this process is critical. So I that took education for me. So that tends to be a big focal point about my process, is helping people to understand how this works, what it is, and how it actually benefits you, in creating that stable foundation, which you can then go build and do all the other things on. So I think that part of it is really critical for me in my process. And then the other thing that I would just caution people to really think about is the price versus cost. All too often in our society, especially with our economic climate today, people are thinking more and more price conscious. Well, there's the price of something, but then there's the cost of something. And when, like Nelson teaches us, everything in life is financed. Well, that also ties into anything you're purchasing and what's the future value of that dollar, those types of things. So if I'm buying one product just because it's cheaper, what's the real cost of that? So that's something to keep in mind as you're going through and vetting the process. And then, is your agent helping you to see things that way? Are they asking you the questions that are getting you to think maybe a little bit differently? Those are important things to consider.
Yeah, thank you, Rob, for bringing those points up. Why don't we just quickly, Jesse, how can somebody get a hold of you if they'd like to talk to you more about the infinite banking concept?
Yeah, you can find me at durhamtalents.com or just look me up, Jesse Durham.
And Rob, how about you?
Yep, you can find me along with our group at perfectspiralcapital.com.
Yeah, and of course, if you stumbled across this Money Advantage podcast, then you may not know how to get a hold of us, but we're at hello@themoneyadvantage.com, and somebody from our team can actually help you through the process of interviewing us, just like we'll be interviewing you. So go ahead and reach out to us at hello@themoneyadvantage.com. And in closing, we just like to remind everybody that success leaves clues. So models the successful few and not the crowd, and build a life and business that you love. Until next time, have a great week.
Well, of course, that was an absolute pleasure for me to be invited back onto the Money Advantage podcast to talk with Bruce, to talk with Rob about finding an agent that matches you. If you would like to have a conversation about what it could look like for you to implement infinite banking into your household, your business, your investing, whatever it is that you're already doing, you can find me at durhamtalents.com to line up a one-on-one free consultation call. My hope is that you live and leave a lasting legacy.